Hello everyone, welcome to today's webinar on infra and app modernization to cloud. Hope you are all staying safe and healthy. My name is Noor Basha and I'm the marketing director for today's webinar. As you know, today's topic for the session is application and infrastructure modernization. Okay, in the next 30 minutes, we will discuss and showcase the discovery process on applications and infrastructure modernization to the cloud. Before we start, let me highlight few housekeeping items. During the webinar, please feel free to post questions and we'll try to answer as many as we can at the end. We are recording this session and we'll be sharing the recording to you in next 24 to 48 hours. With that, let me introduce you to today's session speaker, Mr. Venkata. He is the senior technical architect at Winware Technologies, and he brings close to 20 years of experience in developing and managing system-wide solutions for the infrastructure and storage industry. He has helped several customers to better understand the growing demand of the overall IT lifecycle and its implications to the future of the business. With that, let me hand it over to Venkat to take us to walk us through the entire session. Venkat, over to you.
Hey, thank you, Noor. Thank you, everyone. Good morning and good evening to everyone. Whoever had taken your time, would like to personally thank you for taking your time to be part of this webinar. And I hope you and your family are all staying healthy and safe. As Noor has given a little high-level introduction about my expertise, I was basically more of a data center relocation SME who was doing a whole life cycle of how to migrate a data center, how can you modernize your data center, and how can you encapsulate your applications to the cloud, and so on, in my last 15 to 18 years of experience, especially on this DC relo engagements. So for today's major agenda for today's webinar is, a lot of organizations have their own initiatives every year on do we really need to modernize our environment, and if so, why do we need to modernize? What are the salient features involved in making a decision of modernization cloud, and how to discover the environment? When I say discover, how do you discover your infrastructure, and how do you do an assessment on your applications, and how does an automation and a manual discovery process works, and what are the common discovery mistakes or where the industry or the organizations make while performing the whole discovery of their engagements. And at the end, we can talk about question and answers. Moving along to the next slide. So the major question everyone has is, every organization has, is what is our organizational initiatives or objectives for modernizing your applications? My point being, why are you migrating, and what do you want to accomplish after this initiative or after this objective is met? Like, most of the organizations either have their data centers lease expiry, or they have their out of support operating systems, or the applications are very deployed, like way old, and may not be compatible to the cloud, or may not be compatible to the newly operated machines like Windows 2012 or 2016. And in those situations, organizations come to a place where we want to upgrade the hardware either on-prem or on the cloud. And while we do this upgradation, can we also modernize the existing applications, which can be compatible either cloud-centric or migrated within on-prem, depending upon their tier 1 requirements or revenue-generating application requirements. And the success criteria for an organization is, after you migrate your applications or rehost or modernize your applications to the cloud, how is your application working, and is it working better than before, like working on an older hardware to a newer hardware? And is the response time better, and if there is any lag going to the cloud, and is there any security glitches after you migrate to the cloud. So all those major factors involved were part of an organizational success criteria requirements. And the major caveat for doing to be successful for any discovery engagements or migration engagements is you do a high level in-depth infrastructure assessment as well as an application assessment. Like, you know, you do a deep dive, talking to an application owner, infrastructure owner, one-on-one, and also perform doing a automated discovery process and a manual discovery process. And later on, after your assessment is done, you do your analysis, the data analysis and design, and provide the migration plans or implementation plans to the organizational roadmap, which we'll talk about in next few slides. So as you all know, now that the enterprise world has grown up so much, there are multiple different clouds in the organizations now. People talk about Azure cloud, people talk about AWS, IBM SoftLake, Google Cloud, and HP Synergy. So there are multiple different, every organization has one or the other kind of a private or a public cloud nowadays. So what does an organization think about, and where does their CRM applications or business applications or finance applications or every day-to-day work activities have to land on? So there's a big question mark to the organization, which multi-cloud is suiting best for their organization and suiting best for their applications to run across. And what kind of a confidence does an application owner and an infrastructure owner has, and a business unit has, in moving their application to a modernized environment, either to a multi-cloud or to a new DC relo engagements or DC colo locations or on-prem environment, and how fast can we do a migration, and how ready are your applications? Like, is your application cloud centric, or is your application compatible to run on a cloud, or is your application can be compatible to run on a Windows latest version of operating system, and whether the Java or .NET applications embedded towards it for an upgrade, would your application break, or is it still okay to work in the new environment? Or if the old age developers who actually developed an in-house application are still in the organization, or they left, if they would have left, whether it's still be compatible to the cloud, can we redeploy or rehost it? So there are tons of unknowns for any organization to even start off performing a discovery to start with. And out of which, if there are thousands of applications for any organization, which of those organizations has to be identified as a low-hanging fruits, and how many of them can be started as a first movers? So those are all unknowns which which I'm going to take you up on a 10,000 feet level on the pros and cons of doing the discovery. So here, the major discovery process in the initial days of the world, when everyone talks about VMware Hyper-V environment stage, we were all doing a manual discovery process. Like, you sit in front of the customer, you sit in front of the application owner, run by them with all the questionnaire we create, like application assessment interviews, whatever you do with them, like understanding, oh, what is your upstream and downstream of your applications? Where does your application handshake to? And what kind of response time are you getting? What is an RPO? What is an RTO? There are tons of, are there any databases behind it? And if those databases are collaborated into multiple different servers, or being placed on one server. So all those effectiveness have come up. The discovery process has developed in such a way. We started avoiding manual discovery and started using the technology embedded, where we use inbuilt tools. For example, within Midwire, we have our automated tool system where we does a data collection automatically, and that data collection, after collecting it, the tool is so intelligent that it does its own decision engine on it, like, whether what is the upstream, downstream, where how many servers are being part of this application, whether it's how many web apps, how many application servers, how many DMZ servers, you name it, right? So it collects all kinds of information, and using artificial intelligence, it tries to capture all the data and massage it and creates a report out of it. So that report is actually saved in the form of a master data repository, which we call it as an MDR, and that repository is keeping up to date all the time. So this automation always does a discovery, assessment, and planning in an electronic way, where in previous years when I said the manual discovery used to take like three to 4 months depending upon your environment size and number of applications. But now that we are using an electronic migration and a discovery process, it takes only a few weeks to actually do a whole assessment of your environment electronically. And this also, using an electronic tools, you also get a right workload is on a right resource or not. Some of the situations where every organization have, they probably would have purchased a pizza box or any kind of a DC in the box environments placed in the data center. But irrespective of the utilization needed, they would have over allocated the servers. If the server is needing only 4 gig RAM and 2 CPUs, because they purchased a hardware dedicated for that Oracle server, they probably would have given like 16 GB RAM and 16 CPUs or 64 CPUs. So you technically wouldn't need that. The assessment, whatever the electronic migration, electronic discovery we do it suggests the future mode of a future mode of configuration of your environment. If you move it to the cloud, you don't really need 16 CPUs for it because it's an underutilized server. You just need only 2 to 4 vCPUs on the cloud and keep it running, kind of a thing. So this technology is also scalable and repeatable execution for your entire application portfolio, where it captures the real-time discovery data through an expert system IP and advisory services. And on a high level, as I said, the electronic discovery process or an automated discovery process actually does an auto discovery, and it assesses the environment with a core engine, part of the embedded technology inside it. And it also suggests a plan of how many of them can be moved in the phases. Like, in the top right corner, you can see a matrix here where it says on the first quadrant, it says the low-hanging fruits. In the second quadrant, it refers for a critical servers, and third ones were development or non-development kind of a thing. And it creates a roadmap and in the robust engine, whatever it has created with. So on a high level, how does this discovery process works? Enabling an automated complete picture to build the application portfolio, which means, automated engagements are always an agentless discovery with our tool called WinCam, and discover and map all services, applications, infrastructures across the data centers, whether you may have 18 to 20 different data centers across the globe, and this discovery is not dependent upon, you don't need to be physically on any data center. These are all agentless, and you can sit at home and start doing a discovery from the virtual machine or or a physical machine, which can be used as a console server. And you open the firewall rules between these servers and the data centers, and the handshake starts from our console server and gather all the information. It also creates auto grouping of applications, and it also does a secure end-to-end encryption, so that there is no third-party eye towards your environment. We are not going to review the application outputs or anything like that. All we do is the discovery process. It does is do a handshake and understand who is talking to whom, and that will all be captured in a holistic topology view, wherein which you understand what application is talking to what. So in the middle of this screen, you see there are a lot of dots on the right hand side and a smaller dot here, wherein which in the assessment phase, it understands like one application is talking to 100 different places, and it might be file shares, CIF shares, application data, DMZ environment, load balancers, networking, different subnets. So you can capture all that information in a holistic view and copies everything over onto a master data repository, which is MDR. This can be analyzed in future as well. And if you do an assessment of it today, and after 2 months, when you decide to perform, after 2 months, 6 months down the line, when you decide to actually perform a migration, and if it doesn't know whether the things are accurate, you can go back to MDR, and that is going to pull the actual data out real time again and get you the real statistics. People may change things in 6 months. And the hardware would have been changed, the applications would have been redeployed, or some of them would have been retired. So all that would be captured as a part of our discovery process. So this is how it is actually going to look at it after end of discovery using automated electronic discovery process, where you see an application is talking to a web server, app server, database server, and it's talking to shares, all kinds of pictorial representation. Where you see it here, it says that okay, one application is talking to 100 different places. So how are we going to collaborate all those 100 different environments and create a consistency group or an affinity mapping for that application, so that it is easy for any application related data. You're creating a dependency mapping, and you make a right decision on how and when and what the application can be moved over to the new environment, whether it might be rehosting or refactoring to the cloud. So collecting everything about your application portfolio plays a major role for the discovery. So after the discovery, let me go back to this. So after your discovery is all done, what our tool does is it does an assessment of your data. So when you do an assessment of your data, what it does is it gives a pictorial representation and a suggestions. It doesn't say that this is what you have to do, but it does provide you a suggestion of using our artificial intelligence of how many of your applications, depending on your data and depending upon your hardware out of date, it suggests how many can be retired, how many can be replaced, and how many of them can be retained, and how many of them can be rehosted into the cloud or replatformed. And on the target side of it, in the migration targets, if your application is a tier 1 application or a mission critical or revenue generated application like bankofamerica.com or something like that, you people intend to keep it local onto their local private cloud environment or on their own data center, to make sure that tier 1 application plays a major role, and they don't want somebody to manage their tier 1 application. But rest of other tier 2, tier 3 can be segregated accordingly to a public cloud, private cloud, colo locations, depending upon customers' feasibility and their willingness to go to cloud. We always propose the best practices to the organizations, and they're going to decide after that on what they want to go with. In a similar way, on the left hand side, you see it gives a real good clarification on the governance, whether it needs disaster recovery is already there or not, whether it has a high availability, how about the security associated to your current environment, and how that the master data repository can be accessed, and create a roadmap accordingly here. This is pure for a migration planning effort, and this can be modified accordingly as per customer needs. And after the assessment is done, we create a plan, and we say that, hey, the first movers are low-hanging fruits. These are development machines, and are very underutilized. So why cannot we do a POC on the first movers of 1 or 2 applications? In the 2 phases. One, do a rehost and replatform or refactor, and put it into multiple different migration targets depending upon your requirements. And whether the applications are low priority, you choose them as a second move, where you create a wave for them, and how impact is that, depending upon that, you actually create your own migration plan. After we provide this detailed overview plan, we also go back and discuss the same with the customers, with organizational business units, as well as their infrastructure owners, on to make sure we are talking apples to apples, so that every organization will understand whether we actually did a right analysis or not. We talk to them saying that, okay, what servers, what physical servers do you have in each cabinet? How many of them can we do lift and ship? How many of them can we do a migrate to the cloud? And what's in each U? And how does everything connect to your network? We show them a pictorial representation without outputs. It's not just that we create a document and send them to an email or anything like that. The major factor is discuss, collaborate, and understand the application relationships and dependencies between each application and the infrastructure. And we also, every time we ask customer is, if what happens if you shut down your server, do you have a backup plan, or do you have a high availability or DR in place if something goes wrong? Or what about your CRM application while your SAN is being migrated? So those are the major discussion questions which we always talk about each application all time, every time we do this discovery. So after you do an assessment after you show the results of your electronic discovery to the infrastructure assessment team, we go to an application assessment team and again showcase the results, not on an infrastructure level, but now we talk about an application level. So what is an application overview? And review your application elements. And we review an application architecture, what kind of dependencies, relationships, and technically operational we talk about. The major caveat comes here is about capture CMO versus FMO. This is organizational terminology where we call CMO is a current mode of operation, which may be in their data center or on Azure cloud or an AWS cloud. And what is the FMO is a future mode of operation. If customer is willing to move from AWS to Azure or Azure to AWS or to on-prem with all their lagging issues and customer security issues. So we divide the environment into CMO versus FMO. We talk to them and document every individual task in the form of a playbook for any application, and keep it in the SharePoint for their future use. Whether they migrate it or not for today, that's a different story, but the discovery is a full-fledged documentation view of dependencies. And we create an affinity and a consistency wave groups. That's a migration planning phase, and then hand it over to a respective project managers to perform the migration piece of it. The major discussion area which we always feel about talking is, what are the most common discovery mistakes does any organization or any implementation partner does? Lack of complete infrastructure and application assessment with their applications, shift shares, storage gateways, you name it, terabytes of data storage moving from one data center to other data center. So unless you document everything over, you cannot make right decisions on time. And the major other discovery mistake we always do is most of the organizations manage their own CMDBs, either ServiceNow or their inbuilt CMDBs, but not every individual CMDB is 100% accurate. So people say that when we go there, we say that, hey, we have our own discovery CMDB output. Why cannot you guys go ahead and take that as a baseline and start doing your assessment? So those are one of the major deviations for the migration strategy, where because you don't actually know how accurate is that data and how long was that updated to. So that's the reason we always ask for a best practice. We always follow the best practice to spend time with the application and infrastructure team, analyze their environment in deep, do a physical or virtual network topography, and we all talk apples to apples and document the results there. And document discovery results in the form of a playbook, as I said earlier, for applications. And better to have too much information instead of too little coming out of discovery. The more information you get, the more successful you are in going to a next stage for your assessment and migration piece of it. So that being said, as I said earlier, we are from Winwire, and you can always contact a WinCam advisor who takes a microscope and does all kinds of your discovery on time, productively, and capture all the data needed for your migrations. That ends my quick high-level 10,000 feet webinar on application and infrastructure modernization to cloud. We're open to questions now.
Thanks, Venkat. Thanks for taking us through the overall session. It's really helpful to understand the overall discovery process before we take any decisions around what to migrate, what not to migrate, when to migrate.
Sure.
Good. I think the first question what I have from John is, uh, how much time would it take for automation discovery process?
So that is a good question. When it comes to an automation discovery, is something like it's not just happens in a day or two. All you need to have to know is you need to have a respective access to your servers, like a typical local admin access to your environment, and the firewall rules needs to be enabled. And after that, a dedicated engineer will set up a handshake between all your servers, all your applications across your data centers, and capture the results. So setting up the discovery will not take more than a week time, with gaining all kinds of access and everything. But while it comes towards implementing or capturing the results, will take less than a week or two. By 2 weeks, I would say, from the date of your start, by end of 2 weeks, you should be your discovery. Electronic
Thanks,
ones,
Venkat.
but later on you go back to your application owner, discuss the logistics with them. That may take the next level of discussions for another 1 or 2 weeks, but for an electronic discovery, it just takes not more than 2 weeks.
Perfect. So here is the other question from Mark. Okay, what he asked is, uh, how does it make difference, or like how does it impact if we move just let's say a subset or a part of application to the cloud?
This is one of the good points raised by Mark, because it's not just you're moving one application. I mean, when we talk about an application, it's not just we're moving only the substitute to the cloud or to on-prem or to a colo. You have to move its own family to it. It's like you're dividing and conquering, but that's not going to work in this scenario, because the end user who is connecting would be across the pond from Brazil, and the servers may be somewhere in the United States, and your data center is in, for example, is in Seattle, and your cloud is in Virginia and Northern America. So when a user tries to connect to an application, he sees a lot of latency issues of accessing the data. Probably his web application is on the cloud, but his storage is all sitting on-prem. So every time a user hits the website, it has to route through the cloud and then come back to on-prem and then go back to the user. So there is a latency of roughly around 4 to 5 minutes. So no user would be tolerating it all time, every time, right? So that is a wrong way of going to a migration. So that's where we come into picture of doing the full assessment and create a consistency group, and dependency matrix for your applications, uh, to collaborate and plan the move accordingly in a safer way, so that your migration happens in a seamless manner. I hope that explains, Mark.
I think that certainly helps, Venkat. So I think here is another interesting question. I know this might take a little time, but I think it's important. Can you, there are two parts to this question. So, like, have you done any implemented this overall process for any of the customers? And if yes, like, will you be able to uh, throw some light around that in terms of overall discovery and environment or assessment that is done?
Sure. Yep. So as we are more on a cloud infrastructure engagement portfolio, we normally do this. We have roughly, if I remember something to my mind, I've been in this organization for a few years now, and I think we did roughly around 60 to 70 discoveries a year. Sorry, every half a year kind of a thing. So we have the million-dollar companies and the top 5 MNCs, sorry, the top 100 MNCs who do not have an expertise in automated discovery had reached us to us, and we were doing a part of them in actually doing the migration efforts and discovery as an implementation partner. And when it comes to us just for an application assessment, we do an application assessment every quarterly basis for every customer as a best practice to make sure they're up to date in their assessments and document the results for the infrastructure and keep them in their environments, so that if they want to enhance their environment, they directly go there and use the latest repository we created for them and proceed with their enhancement for refactoring. Does it explain?
Yeah, it does. Again, thanks a lot for taking up those questions, Venkat. I know we are end of this session. If there are any additional questions, please write it to us at marketing@winwire.com, and we'll be more than happy to take those questions. And I will have Venkat answer and respond to some of your questions in case if we are not able to cover here due to the time limitations. With that, thanks everyone for taking time to join this session. I hope you found it useful and informative. Looking forward you joining us to our next webinar session. Thanks, Venkat, for taking us through a great session on infra and app modernization.
Hey, no worries. It is also thank you for the opportunity to be part of this session, and I look forward with the new customers coming in. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.